You know, 100 years, in the grand scheme of Earth's history, it's nothing, right? The blink of an eye. But in the last century, wow, humanity somehow managed to transform the planet more than in all of our history combined. So we're going to explore just how that incredible change happened.
Okay, so our story really starts with a single staggering number. In 1900, the global population was about 1.6 billion. By the year 2000, it had absolutely exploded to over 6 billion. That's not just growth, that's a four-fold multiplication of humanity in just 1 century. The scale of that is almost hard to wrap your head around.
So, that leads to the big question, doesn't it? What happens when you add over 4 billion people to the planet in such a short period of time? How did that explosion in our numbers completely reshape the world we live in?
Well, to answer that, we first have to understand the primary driver of all this environmental change, and that's the massive expansion of the human engine itself. This right here shows the perfect chain reaction. You see, it wasn't just about more people. It was about where they lived and how they lived. All that population growth fueled a huge shift into cities and factories. And this new industrialized world, well, it developed an absolutely insatiable appetite for the Earth's resources.
So, what kind of resources are we talking about? Just think about the basics, but now multiply them by billions. Every new city needed timber and minerals. Every new home needed power. Every single person needed food and water. This demand meant we started consuming the planet's resources on an absolutely epic scale. And that kind of intense pressure always has consequences. So let's take a look at the direct environmental effects of this human expansion. A huge one was desertification. See, to feed a growing population, factory farming basically became the norm. But the heavy use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides started to poison the soil. At the very same time, clearing forests left the earth totally bare, which allowed wind and rain to just strip it away, turning fertile land into dust. Then there's the issue of water. Today, over 1 billion people lack access to clean, safe drinking water. And this scarcity has a deeply human cost, and it disproportionately affects the world's poor. It's so often women and children who have to bear the burden, walking for miles just to collect water from sources that are often polluted. Meanwhile, the engine powering this new world, all the factories, all the power plants and vehicles needed for billions of people, was just pumping enormous amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Everything from generating electricity to growing our food was releasing gases like carbon dioxide and methane. And here's the crucial point. These gases don't just vanish. They build up in the atmosphere, and they start acting like a planetary blanket. They let the sunlight in, but they trap the heat from escaping. Over time, this process raises the Earth's average temperature, a phenomenon we now all call global warming. Once the science became clear, the whole conversation shifted. The problem wasn't just environmental anymore. Oh no, it became political. And this set the stage for one of the most complex debates of our time. Who is responsible for fixing this?
To really get this debate, you have to understand the concept of a carbon footprint. It's essentially a measure of how much greenhouse gas a person or even a whole nation is responsible for. It's a way of putting a number on responsibility, and that's where the international argument really kicks off. And this really illustrates the core disagreement. On one side, you've got the developed nations. They industrialized first, so historically, their emissions are what built up the problem we face today. Now they're urging developing nations to adopt cleaner energy. But on the other side, developing nations argue that's totally unfair. They say, hold on, you got rich using cheap, dirty energy, and now you want us to slow our growth while you bear less of the historical burden? It's a fundamental clash over fairness and responsibility. This fundamental disagreement has been the biggest roadblock to getting real global action. It's a story of really ambitious goals and some pretty frustrating setbacks. Let's take a look at the timeline. So the first major attempt was the Kyoto Protocol back in 1997, which set binding emission targets for developed nations. But it was kind of hobbled from the start when the world's largest economy at the time, the United States, refused to join. Okay, fast forward to 2015 and we see a huge breakthrough, the Paris Agreement. For the first time, nearly every nation on Earth agreed to work together. But that unity proved to be pretty fragile. Just 2 years later, the US announced it was withdrawing, sending a shockwave through the entire global effort. As all this political action has stumbled along, a new force has emerged, one that's pushing for more urgent and radical change: public activism.
Right at the forefront of this movement is the Swedish activist Greta Thunberg. By sparking a global youth climate strike, she gave a powerful voice to the generation that's going to inherit this planet. Her message was simple: listen to the science. And it just cut through all the political noise and put immense public pressure on leaders to finally act.
Okay, so let's just step back for a second and recap this whole chain of events. It all started with that massive population boom, which created an unprecedented demand for resources. That demand then led to widespread environmental damage, from desertification to water scarcity. This in turn released huge amounts of greenhouse gases, sparking a really contentious global debate over who should fix a problem that has, so far, really resisted international cooperation. And so this century of change has left us with one critical question. As the science becomes undeniable and the stakes just keep getting higher, the debate continues to rage. Who, ultimately, is responsible for securing the future of our planet?